All right, so today we're going to be talking about building your own Alexa skill in NetsBlox. Not just talking about it, but starting with a few slides and then hopefully getting into the hands-on workshop portion of it. My name is Broll, and I'm presenting this alongside Tabitha Lee, who was an undergrad who actually worked on the early version of this. I am a research scientist at Vanderbilt who's the I'm part of the NetsBlox team. So before we start with the exciting hands-on portion of the workshop, I'm going to talk a little bit about some background. So first, like a brief intro to NetsBlox. So if you haven't heard of it before, it's an extension of Snap, which provides a lot of new features, such as networking capabilities, which was its primary motivation, but also things like collaborative editing, undo, sharing projects, sharing libraries, and things like that, as well as many other things. One of the new concepts that we'll be using in this workshop, much like the auto graders workshop, if you got that one, is the remote procedure calls concept. This enables users to invoke code that's implemented remotely. So it's like a custom block, but instead of being able to edit it and view the code because it runs locally, it actually runs some function that's on like the NetsBlox server. Now these remote procedure calls are grouped into services based on their functionality. So there's a service like a Google Maps service that lets you fetch different maps and convert latitude and longitude to X and Y coordinates. There's a cloud variables service that, as you might expect, has a bunch of RPCs related to setting and getting variables on the cloud. And the one that we'll be focusing on today is the Alexa service. Now, our motivation with this Alexa skill development in NetsBlox is really just trying to make programming more relevant, and engaging for new programmers. So like smart devices and voice assistants can be found basically everywhere, ranging from smartphones to your home, to your car. So creating voice assistants can certainly be a bit more engaging and exciting then, because you're able to program some of these devices that you can interact with on a daily basis. And of course, it's even better when we can do it in a familiar blocks-based programming environment. These slides are available on the workshop information page on the SnapCon website. So this link at the bottom, which I'll be sharing in the chat shortly, can be found there again as well. But this is where we can find all the documentation, including the walkthrough that we'll be starting with. Before we jump into the hands-on portion, last thing I want to talk about is just, again, a high-level, overview of the flow. Again, this is a similar structure to the auto graders workshop if you got that one, but basically the first thing that we're going to need to be able to create Alexa skills is an Amazon account, and it's going to have to be a developer account. Now we have a link to click on, so if you have an existing Amazon account, you can registered as a developer account as well. And then we need to log into Amazon from NetsBlox. This enables NetsBlox to create the skills on our behalf. And then for testing, you probably want to install Amazon Alexa on your phone. If you already have like an Echo or things like that, you should already have the app because it's used to install skills and stuff. And then we'll get into the exciting portion where we start actually creating skills with a simple, just barely more complicated than a hello world example below. All right, so without further ado, let's jump into the actual meat of the workshop. So we're going to be using, let me pull up my chat so I can start sharing some of these URLs. We're going to start with this documentation at the link that I just sent. This has some of the useful links that we'll need, including registering as a developer with Amazon. So in other words, either creating an Amazon account that's a developer account, or enabling these developer capabilities for your existing account. So if I open this in a new tab, you'll see that I'm already logged in. So it'll just tell me that I have a vendor ID and a customer ID. And if you're not a developer, if your account hasn't been registered as a developer account, the problem is that you won't have a vendor ID, and Amazon requires you to have one of those if you're going to be creating Alexa skills. All right. So just to get an idea, I'm guessing I have been expecting people to be following along and building things, but if people don't want to create like an Amazon account and you just want to follow along, that's all good too. But it would be nice if you don't mind mentioning if you're planning on following along and like building the code as we go in the chat to get an idea of cadence. I'd hate to be checking to make sure everyone's caught up and find out that no one's actually building it. And either way that you want to do it is great, but I'm just following along. Cool. Just trying to get an idea of how to handle it on my side. Cool. All right, sounds good. Because steps like these are much faster if you're just watching, and we can kind of breeze through them, but and take a bit longer if you're doing it with your hands on. But of course, it's always exciting when you're going with the hands-on portion. Cool. All right. Nice. Someone already has a dev account. That's great. Great. Okay, so once you see those IDs, you can go back to that first link, so the documentation, and there's one more link that we'll need to follow, and this is logging in with Amazon on the NetsBlox side. So then NetsBlox is able to create these skills on your behalf. So it's this second link right here in the documentation. And when you click on it, you should see, please sign in with your Amazon account. We click login with Amazon, and then we can just sign in. And then once we sign in, this basically grants NetsBlox the permissions to be able to create these skills for you. All right. Otherwise, we'd be able to. Oh yeah, no problem. So basically, if you just click on so looking at the first link that I sent, and actually I'll just copy the link here. So if you just click on this link will ask you to log in with Amazon. And then you'll get a pop-up that's like, click allow to sign in to NetsBlox to your account. What is this link? I'm not seeing what is this link. Okay, so
you're muting. You're seeing this link, but I think it happens so fast I don't see what you're clicking.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so
just actually hover over where your link, Yeah,
no problem. So when I click on the link, it should bring you to a page like this. Please sign in with your Amazon account. When you click on that, you should get a pop-up like this one. And
sorry to think, where is the link that brings you to here?
In the chat, right above your comment. Or you can find it right here. So, sorry, I started from this. The link that I just sent in the chat is the documentation on the Alexa service in NetsBlox. And it has the two URLs or the two links that we're clicking on here. I copied one and pasted it directly in the chat. Cool. Sorry about that. I don't mean to move too quickly. So once you get this, once you see this page, then you can log in with your Amazon account. And once you allow it, then NetsBlox is given permission to create the skills on your behalf. Okay. So now that we've got the authorization kind of step worked out, now we can jump into actually creating our first skill. I'm going to start actually from this walkthrough from the documentation. Again, it's I started with the last link that I sent in the chat, and now I'm just clicking on create your first Alexa skill, just the first walkthrough that we have here. All right, so I'm gonna hop back and forth between NetsBlox and actually no, I'll just go side by side of these windows. Okay, so anyway, so the first thing that I'm going to do when I start working on my first Alexa skill here is I'm opening up editor.netsblox.org. And then I'm going to import a library that I'm using in this walkthrough. It's just kind of a helper library called structured data. It lets you build up these key value pairs. So like a list of lists where where you can say like the name is some value and so on and so forth. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a variable called my skill config. So it's the configuration for the Alexa skill that I'm making. And I'm going to start by setting this to an empty list. So it's just an empty configuration. It has no settings or things like that. And then I'm going to set the value of the name in the skill config to my first skill. Now, when I run these two blocks, oh, all right. So Sir Kitten 2 said that he pressed allow on, or it lists skills is giving him an empty list. So that's actually expected. So that's good. I'm sorry, Simon, I don't mean to go so fast. Basically, all I've done so far is open up editor.netsbox.org, select libraries from the drop-down list here, and then import this library called structured data. If it helps, I can actually make this project public, so I can share it, so then you can just jump to where I currently am. If that's something that you're interested in. All right. Oh, yeah, that's tough. It's hard when you only have one screen, so you have to jump between Zoom and NetsBlox. Well, just to give you an option anyway, here is the link to the current project that I'm building up, this initial walkthrough. I can save periodically, and then if you ever refresh after I save, you'll see the latest version. So basically what we have here is we imported this structured data library from the official NetsBlox libraries. And then we created this skill config variable that we're using to store the configuration for our skill. And we named it my first skill. And then we also need to set an invocation name. So in other words, how do we refer to it when we're talking to Alexa? So this would be something like, this is like when you might ask Alexa, like, Alexa, tell, whatever it is. So tell, in this case, maybe NetsBlox skill to get me the weather, or whatever sort of activity you want, or whatever sort of command you want to pass along. So I guess I used my skill, or my skills was used in the walkthrough, so I might stick with that. And now when we run these two blocks, we can see what it's doing is just building up this list of lists, or this table, where the name is my first skill and the invocation is my skill. Right. And then, so these are the most, I guess, basic things that you need to set. The most, so I don't believe that's supported by Alexa, at least not to my knowledge. Sorry, someone asked if we could put the invocation as a list, providing multiple options of how to refer to your skill, so giving it multiple names. So I haven't ever seen that in the Alexa skill, or as far as I know, it's not supported by Alexa, put it that way. Maybe there's some hidden feature I don't know about, but at least when looking at like the schemas that they use to represent skills, I didn't see that as an option. So once we set these basic things, now we need to start defining what are called intents. Now an intent, when we're talking about a voice assistant, is like some command, like tell me the weather, or you know, add some item to my shopping list. So it's really like a command, except it might not, but sometimes it could be a, you know, a question or things like that. So I think that's why they call it an intent. Like it's something that's representing some intention of the user, as opposed to like, you know, like a command or question, which is of course not quite as generic term. So an intent is actually represented similar as a skill config. The invocation is actually the name of your skill. So sorry, there's a question about the invocation is the command, right? So a skill can have multiple things that it can do. So like, for example, there's like, I think we have a shark skill for like a, you know, shark RoboVac. And it has different commands for like start cleaning, stop cleaning, and things like that. These commands would be would be represented as intent. So like start cleaning would be an intent, stop cleaning would be an intent. I think there's probably a schedule cleaning. And the invocation would be like, you know, shark or shark vacuum or shark IQ. I'm not sure what the whole like official name is, but anyway, so each skill can have a set of intents or like commands or questions that they support. And when we get to the actual commands, I mean, we'll see some examples of these actually here in a minute. So maybe I'll just continue on and we can kind of see as they come up. So an intent is represented similarly. So it's kind of like similar to the skill config, where we have this sort of key value pair representation. So we can define a new variable for our intent. We can set our intent to an empty list to start, because it doesn't have any keys or values or, you know, rows in this table, so to speak. And we can start by actually defining a one of the built-in intents that are supported by Alexa. So we're going to set the name of this intent to Amazon.stop intent. So this is when you tell Amazon to stop doing whatever it's doing. When you're interacting with this skill, maybe you told the skill to do something, and then later you say, you know, tell my skill to stop. And now we can define a custom handler for this. Handler in our intent. Ooh. And now this is where the kind of functional programming capabilities of Snap that we kind of inherit in NetsBlox are really useful. So we can just drag this ring over here, because we need to create a function for that, which tells, which basically says what this skill should do when it's told to stop. So we can implement it here in blocks. So we grab our report block. So this is a function now. When it runs, it just returns the text stopping. Or maybe we can be more interesting. You got it, boss. Okay. I don't know. Whatever sort of thing you'd like it to say when you tell it to stop, or do when you tell it to stop. Now when we run this, we can see that our intent has been defined as well. And let's pop this up in a dialog. We can see that this intent is now defined accordingly. So its name is stop intent, which is again a built-in intent that Amazon has. And then the handler, so in other words, what to do when told to stop, is to just return the text, or in this case, to return this text, which Alexa will then say, you know, in this case, you got it, boss. Now, the one last thing that I need to do is we'll notice that this intent isn't actually in our skill configuration. So we're going to need to, we'll need to first actually add this intent as an intent in the skill config. So the field is called intents. So it's a list of all the commands or questions or intents that you support. And we can just say we only support one intent right now, and it's this stop intent. All right. Now I can see that we have this list of intents, and it's not shown the nicest way right now, but we can see that this is name is stop intent, and the handler is you got boss. All right, so now at this point, we should have the simplest version that should be able to that we should be able to actually create a server skill for. So let's give it a whirl. Now we can, and then before we jump into this slightly more complicated custom intent, if we go to the Alexa service using this call block that we get under the network tab, and this lets us call RPCs, or these functions that are implemented on the server. We select the Alexa skill, and that has a number of different RPCs available. We're going to be using create skill. And if we drag skill config into the configuration argument slot, now I can run this, and it'll take a second. All right, so now I wasn't sure if it would let me create one that only has a stop intent, and it turns out that it won't. So you can see that it says that the interaction model is not valid. So in other words, the way that we interact with it, it's missing an intent here, really, I guess. So our interaction model does not include custom intents. So we need to have something interesting, something more than stop intent. So in that case, let's actually jump into adding our custom intent. So I'm just going to redefine I'll actually do this in a separate script, just to keep it a little. Project link, you got it. All right, so I'm saving this again. So the project link that I just sent should have everything that I currently have. So if you open it, you should see the project in the exact state that I'm in. And just for reference, in case people have joined that didn't see this earlier link, we're actually following this walkthrough that's also available here in the documentation. Which of course I don't have to. I wanted to follow the documentation so that you can see that there is a reference in case you want to revisit this later and don't remember exactly what we did. So I figured I would just follow it myself too. So here we're going to make an intent, another intent, and now this is going to be a custom intent. So this one, the first one we started with is stop intent. We actually don't need to define, but I wanted to start with because it's a simpler intent than when you start creating custom intents. Because Amazon already knows what kind of things the user will say that mean that it's asking it to stop. Whereas when you have a custom intent, you actually have to tell it like what does this command look like and things like that. And we'll see an example of that here in a second. So now the second one that we will build for this, our initial Alexa skill, will be one that just maybe greets the person. So we can create another intent. Actually, I'll call this one custom intent. Do it exactly like that. So here's a custom intent. It's set to an empty list to start. And we're going to set the name to greeting intent. Now, since this is not an Amazon special intent, in other words, it's not like an existing built-in intent that Amazon recognizes, we actually have to tell it what type of phrases or utterances invoke this intent. So we can give a list. So this is similar to what Learn, Earn, and Fun was asking about. If you can give multiple options for the invocation, when it wasn't clear about the invocation being the skill name versus the intent name. So for intents, you actually can have a bunch of different phrases that resolve to the same type of thing. So here we could say like, hello. I might start with a simpler one actually than we see in the walkthrough to start. So if we say something like hello or greetings, so I can give a few different examples of some utterances that'll trigger trigger this intent handler. And then I can also define the handler. And now this is saying again what function will be called, or how should we handle any of the, like, a greeting intent. And we can maybe say good to see you. All right, now we can create this custom intent as well. So, oops, sorry, I made a little mistake here with all my copying. So we have to set custom intent. I had set the name and utterances and handler in intent instead of custom intent. Yes, sorry, I don't mean to move so fast. So, just make that, oh, there we go, that's nice. Okay, so I'm gonna take a minute to make sure everyone has time to catch up. Can everyone either give me a reaction, like a thumbs up, or need a little time in the chat or something, so I can get an idea of how it's going for everyone? I'm also going to save this, and for anyone who wants to just jump to the current version that I'm on, if they click on that link, it'll give them the current version, in case you hopped in a little late and missed some of the beginning and things like that. All right. So all right, so so now, just to kind of recap our code, I'm going to actually split these blocks out a little bit. Here we go. So we can think about it in each individual step. So the first thing we did was we created our skill configuration. So we said our skill is going to be called my first skill. The invocation is my skill. Then we're going to create our first intent. Now we started with the simplest intent that we can make, which is using a built-in intent type called stop intent. And we defined our handler to say, you got it, boss. So in other words, if we told Alexa something like, Alexa, tell my skill to stop, it should respond with, you got it, boss. After defining a built-in intent, we started defining the simplest custom intent we could. We just called it a greeting intent. Now, since it's not a built-in intent, we have to tell Alexa what type of phrases should resolve to this intent. So in other words, what kind of things the user says means that we should invoke this intent, or means that they have this intent. So if someone says something like hello, greetings, or good day, we think that this is a greeting intent. And then Alexa, or the skill, will handle it by responding with good to see you. And then now we can actually add all these intents to the skill config. I'm going to rerun all these just to make sure that it's up to date and the latest. But now, instead of just passing the intent, we're also going to pass our custom intent. Or sorry, we're going to assign this intents field in our skill config to being these two intents rather than just the single one. And at this point, we should be able to create our skill. So now when we run this RPC, I see, oops, I forget. So there are, it actually doesn't want punctuation in the utterances. It'll figure those things out for us. So let's actually remove these exclamation points. And now I rerun those two code blocks. And then create the skill. Now, and now we can see that it returns an ID that Amazon uses internally to to represent this skill. So it doesn't depend on the name. So you could change the name or the invocation or whatever you want of your skill, and it knows that you're referring to this specific skill because you're using this specific ID. All right, so far so good. Now we just have to test it. Now there are two ways we can test it. One is on our phone right away, but for those of you who might not have the Alexa app installed or set up just yet, there is actually a way we can test it still within the browser. So if we look back at the Alexa skill or service, sorry, the Alexa service has an RPC called Invoke skill. So given the ID of a skill and some utterance, some phrase that you're saying, this will actually invoke it and tell you what the result would be. So this means we need to figure out what our ID is for the skill we created, because it popped up in this little dialog, but we didn't set it to a variable or anything. So if we actually look at the other RPCs in the Alexa service, we can see there's one to list skills. All right. So I think it's probably the second one. So let's find out. Let's just give it a try. So if I get the second skill, here's the first one. I think it's the first. I don't know. Okay, well, I'll try the second one. So this could be using a different skill that I have, but we'll find out. So if I say something like hello to this skill, okay, so that was a different skill, sorry. So if I grab the first item in our list skills list and we say hello, we can say it says good to see you. Ignore the message sender. All right. Is everyone with me so far? All right. So great. So I'm going to save one more time. If you use that link that's in the chat, the last link that I posted. So yes, so that's a good question. So now I'm going to actually move to testing on the phone. So if you have an Alexa, you'll notice that the way that you have to install skills is actually through the app. So you get the Amazon Alexa app on your phone, you connect to your device, your Echo, and then you can install your skills from your app onto your device. So it's a similar flow. So in other words, I guess what I mean to say is that so when we start testing it on our, so if we install this skill using the mobile app, as long as this is synced with our Echo, we should be able to install it on our Echo as well, or it should be available on our Echo as well. So I'm going to open the app. I'm going to open the app. So you get your starting screen here. And if you go to more in the lower right corner, oh my goodness, this is hard to see. Can people make out that resolution? Right in the middle, there's a button for skills. And then now we'll see on the top right, there's a your skills slot. I'm going to do this a little fast. But basically, bottom left corner or right corner, to look at more, we can select our skills. Once we select our skills, there's a discover, there's categories. This is just how you install skills on the Alexa. But you'll notice that, oh, darn it, I said Alexa. I said the name, the wake word. And you'll notice that there are a few different categories. Usually you'll be starting with discover, or tabs, I guess. Usually you'll start with discover and search for a skill. But you'll notice there are two others. There's categories and your skills. Now, if we actually click on your skills when looking from the skills dashboard or view, we'll see that we have our enabled skills, our blueprint skills, or our development skills. So if we actually click on the development skills, now we should see my first skill show up as one of the skills. All right. So is everyone with me so far? It'd be nice if I could easily screen share or cast my phone screen, but I guess this will have to do for now. So basically, you go to this the same way you would install skills on your Alexa or from the mobile app. So it's not showing up in dev with the same code. Okay, I get an error with the same code. All right, so this isn't. Do you know? Are you sure that you're using the same Amazon username for both? Let's see where we check this. For Amazon account, I mean. Yep. Okay, so all right, so we have two different comments here. All right, let's see here. So Simon says his isn't showing up in dev. And so the first thing I would check there is making sure that the account is the same. And then, and that was an easy fix. That was an easy fix. So, okay, so I'll answer Sir Kitten's question because it's a pretty straightforward one. So it says account linking is required because some of these handlers might do things like, for example, set user variables in the cloud, or things where you need to have an associated NetsBlox account. So in other words, since your handler that you define in NetsBlox might require a NetsBlox account to know, like what user is setting the variable or things like that, it just links. Oh, I see. You link your Snap account. All right. So, all right, that is a good question. Okay, so, interesting. So, okay, so there is a way to answer Sir Kitten's question. It's he said he linked his Snap account. So how does he sign in with Snap? So when you link your Snap account, it does create a NetsBlox account for you. Just lets you log in using your Snap credentials. Now that means that I don't remember if when you link a Snap account, did you get an email for an initial NetsBlox password? Because usually there's one when people create an account of like okay, so if you could log in using that username and password, it'll be the same account. It's just logging in using NetsBlox to authenticate you rather than using Snap, if that makes sense. But that's a good point. I'll make a note of that so that it's easier to do that in the future, because it would be nice for people to be able to log in with Snap through this as well, rather than having to be fall back on this NetsBlox password. All right. Okay, and then there was another question. I feel like I'm gonna butcher this name. How do you pronounce your name? Is it Radaya? Do I have to? Let's see, 1 second. On your initial invite email, did it say your username? It should have probably said your username, like hello so and so. Is that right? So I guess this is one way to check. So if you log in with Snap from NetsBlox in the browser and you just click on the cloud icon, you should see it'll say log out with your username. Now this username, when you log in with Snap, what it does is if you log in with Snap and it's the first time you've logged in with Snap and you don't have a NetsBlox account or anything like that, it'll create a NetsBlox account for you. This NetsBlox account will try to have the same username as your Snap account. But if that username is already taken, then it'll suffix it with _snap at the end. So like if I tried to, suppose I tried to log in using someone tried to log in with the username Brian with Snap into NetsBlox without any other account. Since my username is Brian, theirs would be Brian _snap. So it'd make sure that it's not colliding with any existing one. That's the long version. The short answer is that if you go to the NetsBlox editor and you click on the cloud icon where it says logout username, if you just look there, you can see what your username is, and then use the password from your initial login email, and that should work. Now, I might be mispronouncing the name, and if I am, I'm sorry, but Radaya, can you expand on what the error is? And feel free to correct my pronunciation, because I'm sure it's probably best. All right. Oh, while I wait, I'm actually going to log in or enable the skill so I can demo it here. In the skills Amazon app. Okay. You get an error. Yep, okay, right. Well, Radaya, do you mind continuing to expand on that? I'm not exactly clear what the error is.
He said account linking required.
Yeah. Oh, so oh, sorry. I gotcha. Okay, that's not an error. Sorry. If you click on it to enable, it'll let's see. I misunderstood that. So so when you enable the skill, it will. I already enabled mine, but it'll have a red thing underneath the name saying account linking required. When you click on it, yeah. So it'll say account linking required, and when you click on it to enable it the first time, it'll direct you to NetsBlox, and then you can log in with NetsBlox. And as I mentioned earlier, the reason why this is required is because some RPCs require or need to know who the user is in order to be able to actually work correctly. So since you already had to be logged in and authenticated to create the app or to create the skill, it just requires it there as well. So